What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Ben Thomas Show. Thanks for coming back. Guys, the Mace Windu has been released from Hot Toys, the blogger photos are up, and people are not so happy with this. One might say the Windu has been sucked out of the room, and so I wanted to give you guys my thoughts on this because this is a figure that I've got coming to the collection. I'm really excited about it. I love Sam Jackson, but does this look like Sam Jackson? Stick around and find out. If you guys like the video, hit the like button, smash the subscribe if you're new to the Ben Thomas Show, and let's get into it.
Oh, pardon me, but it's
Ben Thomas Showtime. Let's go.
Okay, everybody, so welcome back. So I think there's a couple things that I want to address with this figure in particular. First of all, I do want to give it some credit first, because I did decide to put this in my pre-order basket not that long ago. And, you know, even though it's been a year and we were kind of all crossing our fingers that there would definitely be some rework on the sculpt, I actually think we got our wish. There is some noticeable changes with regards to the sculpt here that I'm seeing, especially within the brow ridge line. They do look like they've changed that a little bit. Now, I actually think the brow ridge line almost at certain angles made this face look more like Sam Jackson. They've almost softened the features here by reducing it, and while I think at some angles I really do see the likeness to Sam Jackson, I also at other angles feel like it's lost entirely. So it's a very divisive sculpt for not only myself, but I can also understand for the community. Some of the praises with regards to this figure: I love the purple light up saber. I love the outfit. I think the tailoring looks really, really good. The detail on the hand sculpts look fantastic as always. And look at the skin texture on his actual face and head, his forehead, his like the top of his head, like really, really dialed in details. But the moneymaker is always in the sculpt. Now, one would argue, I've got figures in my collection here that at first glance, when blogger photos came out, I would say people like hated it. Like, I'm thinking my Endgame Loki. That slicked back hairstyle sculpt, people were like, who the hell is that? But then when I put him in my collection with the helmet on and different display lighting, I can really see Tom Hiddleston in that sculpt. And I'm wondering if this will actually be the same. Now, I actually think one of the things that detracts from the likeness of this figure is that you can't move the eyes. Most figures nowadays have that rolling eye system, and with the rolling eye system, you can really kind of get the cheeky look, you know, get some of that character in the face. And it's amazing what a side eye can do, especially from an actor like Samuel L. Jackson. And I think that that was a huge miss on this sculpt. I think when they went back to the drawing board a little bit here, they should have found a way to give us those rolling eyes. So for me, I actually think that's part of the reason that at certain angles, I can see it. And at other angles, I'm like, not so much. Now, the other thing we have to really recognize here, and I think most of us do, but our memories are short, right? We have recency bias. When I close my eyes and think about Samuel L. Jackson, I'm thinking about him kind of now, or even just over the last decade, right? His 65-year-old self to his 75-year-old self. But he was 55 during the filming of Phantom Menace, so he's probably, what, 57, 58 maybe? Which means that he looks like a very different person back then. Like, this is going back 20 years ago. I'm a 37-year-old man almost. Going back 20 years ago to my 17-year-old self, I look like an entirely different person, people. And so let's take a look at what he looked like back then. And I've got some images of him both from Clone Wars, but also from Revenge of the Sith, because we also just got that Darth Sidious. And honestly, because he's from Revenge of the Sith, I actually think people might want the Mace Windu now in their display to kind of recreate that scene where he dies, or at least we think he dies, because of course in Star Wars, if they don't show the death, is he actually dead? I mean, it remains to be seen. I've still always thought we'd get him back at some point, and I honestly think he would come back if given the opportunity, despite his age now. I think he's still awesome. He's still got badass presence in films. Like, I would love to see a return of Mace Windu. Somehow he survived the fall, right? But at the same time, I could also see people wanting to pair Mace with Darth Sidious, of course, for that iconic kind of death scene of his. And so while that's a little grim, it's a little dark, I could see that. I got this figure because I always thought Mace Windu was a badass. I liked the purple lightsaber. I did like him in the films. Now, while the films, I feel like really stripped Samuel L. Jackson away of his personality a little bit. He's a little bit more cardboard in these films than I think so many of his other iconic performances. But I think that could also be contributing to why we feel like this doesn't look like him as much. Because unlike the Black Adam rock sculpt that we got, where that second sculpt you actually get the people's eyebrow, which is ridiculous to be included for a figure, but we don't get anything like that with Sam here in this figure. He's got a very neutral face. He was meant to be very kind of stoic as a Jedi, and I think that they actually captured that. And when I look at younger photos of him here side by side, I can understand why people are feeling like this doesn't look as much like Samuel L. Jackson anymore. Because even these original photos of him, while it's obviously the actor, even that, it's very much a younger version of this person. And in a display, I think it's going to look fantastic, to be honest. And so I'm actually still really excited about getting this in hand and in the collection. For me, lighting absolutely plays a factor. Professional blogger photos usually don't lie too badly. I mean, you see some photo editing and some photoshopping in there for sure, especially when it comes to lightsaber effects. I mean, obviously this lightsaber is not going to be as bright as the photos show it to be, but at the same time, I also think a lot of the time, once you have a figure in hand and you can kind of rotate the sculpt and look at it and see it at all angles and find that angle for you that's iconic to Mace Windu here or Samuel L. Jackson, I actually think it might be something that you're kind of happy with ultimately. Now, what should we do with regards to Hot Toys? When we put out the request there and say, this sculpt isn't good enough, do we expect a response? Because really at this point, Hot Toys has shown that sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't. The Tony Stank controversy, 2 years ago now, was wild because people were getting that sculpt in hand and saying like, this doesn't look anything like Tony Stark. But then what ultimately happened was the original Tony Stank head sculpt feels more rare now because it's kind of like it's an iconic piece in the collection. Now, I also don't think you should buy this if you're not happy with it. At the end of the day, right? Don't buy it. I wish there was a bit of a clause with companies that if we weren't happy with sculpts, we could get at least a portion of our NRD back. I know that's never going to happen because that's just not business. Places like Sideshow and other places that you buy these figures from, they need to protect their ability to bring this stock in and know that if people cancel, their money is also protected. Like, I get that, but when there are divisive sculpts, when the community is asking for changes right off the hop, communicate with us or maybe give us something else. Give us the ability to change our order down the line. Maybe at least move those dollars into another figure at the very least, if you just are not happy with the final result. And of course, production changes from prototype often as well. Often with that kind of mass production of these sculpts, they do soften a little bit. I don't actually think that this is softened. I just think that it's been changed ever so slightly. And some people would say for better or for worse. For me, it might actually be for worse, but it doesn't mean that I'm unhappy with it. In the side-by-side photos like we showed earlier here of him as a younger man, that brow ridge line isn't as extreme. He's not as wrinkled. He actually looks amazing for 55. Like, if I look as young as he does at 55 here, I'll be very, very happy. But again, at the end of the day, you need to be happy with this coming to your collection, because if you put it on the shelf and you've spent that, $280 to $350 depending on exchange rates and conversion costs and shipping and all of the things, and you're just not happy with it, right now Hot Toys isn't retaining the value that they once had. It used to be that you could kind of pull the trigger on a risk. You could bring it into the collection. If you weren't happy, you could sell it and at least usually get your full retail back, if not maybe even make a couple bucks on the side. But I've noticed over the last year, any figure that I have tried to move on, typically I've lost about 30 to 50 bucks. It's not a ton, but over the course of the 55 plus figures I have in my collection, that can add up pretty dramatically. And I think it's smart to save those dollars for the other things that really get you. Now, last thing to note here is that this is probably the only Mace Windu we're going to get. I would think, anyways. I don't think that they need to come out with a Revenge of the Sith version. I just don't think that the character changed enough. But I'm also not a Mace Windu super fan. So guys, if I'm mistaken there, or if I'm missing a detail in the costume, please feel free to let me know. But again, overall, it looks pretty much the same. Maybe subtle color differences, some subtle tailoring differences. But overall, I don't think I would need another Mace Windu. I think that this will be good enough for the collection. But it also means that this is absolutely the best representation of a Mace Windu that exists in 6 scale. So if you love the character, this may or may not be your only opportunity to get it. Now, of course, there's also custom head sculptors that exist in the world, but keep in mind that's likely going to double the cost of your figure. If you reach out to somewhere like v.collectibles on Instagram, they do amazing work and paintwork and everything, but those are pricey boys. So Sam Jackson or Mace Windu would have to be one of your favorite characters, I think, to justify that type of additional cost to go on the body of this figure. And I don't think that this sculpt is that bad. I don't think you should feel compelled to spend $300 to $400 extra for a custom sculpt. I just don't think it's that bad. I think it's going to be better once we get it in hand. But I do see, again, the point of some of the folks out there. When they look at this photo, for example, I think it looks like pretty much like Mace Windu. When I look at this photo, not as much. It definitely is lost in the wash. But guys, I pose the question back off to you. Is this a figure you have coming to the collection? Were you originally kind of disappointed with the sculpt and hoping they'd tweak it, and then when they did, are you happy with the changes now? Or are you actually less happy? Do you feel like some of the details actually got lost, and he looks less like Sam Jackson? I'd be curious to see what you guys have to say in the comments down below. But of course, guys, if you like this style of content, if you like the video, please hit the like button, smash the subscribe if you're new to the Ben Thomas Show, and of course, we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Wow, what a great audience. Be sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, because subscribing makes you feel good.
In case I don't see ya. Good afternoon, good evening, and good night.